This episode is brought to you by Schiit Audio, manufacturers of sanely priced stacks, amplifiers, preamplifiers, and EQ devices. Click the link in the show notes for more information.
Today, we're going to take a close look at the Focus 30 loudspeaker from DYNAUDIO. It's a floor standing loudspeaker, it's an active loudspeaker, it's a streaming loudspeaker. So it's a streaming, active, floor standing loudspeaker. But the Focus 30 isn't a large or a heavy loudspeaker. It sits 90 centimeters tall and puts around 17 kilos each on the scale. Now the fit and finish on the Focus 30, for me, is pretty much flawless. I can't find fault with it at all, apart from the fact that the wood veneer, this is a walnut version, it doesn't really wow. It's kind of got that sort of understated cool that Danes seem to like. So we'll just chalk it up to that. We won't say it's a failing, we'll just call it Denmark's or the Danes' understated cool. So if that's your thing, then you're really going to like these speakers. The Focus 30 is a 2.5-way loudspeaker. So that means we get two, they look like bass drivers, but one of them's a mid-bass driver, so it does mid-range and bass. The one below does bass only. They measure 14 centimeters across. They're made of something called MSP. If you want to know what MSP is, I'll leave a link in the description box below. This is a sealed design, so there's no port on the front or the rear or anywhere else. But there is a tweeter, obviously. It's a 28mm soft dome tweeter. And because this is an active loudspeaker, the electronics live inside the speaker itself, inside the speaker cabinet. And that means each driver has its own amplifier and its own DAC. The amplifier module comes from another Danish company, Pascal. And when I spoke to DYNAUDIO about this, actually again recently, so subsequent to my podcast interview with their chief engineer, they told me that this is not just any old like Class D module or Class D amplifier. This is like a really high-end solution. I have no way of confirming or denying that. But what we do know is that the mid-bass driver and the bass driver get 280 watts of power and the tweeter gets 110 watts of power. The crossover is done in DSP, and so too are a couple of other very clever features. The first of which, each speaker can detect whether the grill is present. They're magnetically attachable. So that when it detects the presence of the grill, it just alters the speaker's output just slightly so that each speaker sounds the same whether the grill is on or off. Now I prefer the look of these speakers, the Focus 30 with the grills off. Secondly, there is an app that comes with the speakers, with the Focus 30. It's called something quite, again, understated / bland. It's called DYNAUDIO Setup and Control. It allows us to adjust the top end output of these speakers just subtly. So we can specify neutral, bright, or dark. And sometimes I prefer the dark setting on some material. And also inside that app, we can tell the speakers which one is the primary and which one is the secondary. So we can choose the left or right. So for me, I've got the primary speaker set up as the left speaker, which is over my right shoulder here. And the left and the right speaker communicate wirelessly over something called WISA. If you don't know what WISA is, I'll leave a link in the description box below. It operates at either your choice in the app of 48 kilohertz sample rate, that is, or 96 kilohertz. But if you want to put a hardwired connection in, it's not Ethernet here, it's coax. So you need a fairly long digitally coax cable to link that speaker with that speaker. I chose wireless, I chose 96 kilohertz inside the app. And WISA inside the Focus 30 isn't just for communication between the speakers, it's also a digital input, an over-the-air wireless digital input. And it's one of the reasons why we don't get HDMI on the back of the primary loudspeaker. We only get Toslink, coax and RCA analog. Now I suspect that DYNAUDIO, when they started the development of this speaker, or this series, because there's the 10 stand mount and the larger 50 floor stander, is they expected WISA to be sort of further along the road than it is right now. Because some LG TVs have a WISA output. I think there's another brand, I think it might be, it's not TCL, I can't remember them right now off the top of my head, but it's not really that common in TVs yet, but it could be. So if you have a TV and you want to send a signal to the Focus 30, but you don't have WISA in your TV, you can use something called the Sound Send adapter, which I think is made by WISA. And I don't have a WISA Sound Send, but I do have a Platin hub because I've got the Bookart speakers in the cellar. I pulled the hub out, I set it up. So I've got HDMI coming out of my TV. It goes into the Platin hub, and then the Platin hub sends left and right signals wirelessly over WISA into each of the speakers. That's pretty clever, I think. Of course, we don't just buy a pair of Focus 30 to stream our TV's audio to them. We also want to stream music over our home network. And here we have a choice of Wi-Fi or Ethernet, for which DYNAUDIO specify the inclusion of Roon readiness, which isn't ready at time of taping, Tidal Connect, plus the big three, Google Chromecast, Spotify Connect, Apple AirPlay 2, and there's also Bluetooth as well. But if we look inside DYNAUDIO's smartphone app again, we find that there's only one integration option for Tidal. That's it. There is a button for Spotify, but that just takes you to the Spotify app. It's clear that DYNAUDIO think a little bit like I do, in that basically you should really just be using the existing app, the streaming services app, either Tidal or Spotify or whatever, and then just selecting the loudspeakers from a drop down inside the app and not having to go to the hardware manufacturer's own app and then plug in your login details. That's starting to look a little bit long in the tooth in my book. The only exception here is Roon, obviously, which is what I mainly used in testing these loudspeakers. But you know what other streaming active floor standing loudspeaker also specifies the big three, plus Roon Ready, plus Tidal Connect, plus Bluetooth? Yep, the KEF LS60 Wireless. And what better way to talk about the DYNAUDIO Focus 30's sound than with a side-by-side comparison to the KEF. But I didn't just use streaming to test the Focus 30 or compare them to the KEF LS60 Wireless. I played back some vinyl, so obviously you use the analog input on the DYNAUDIOs. This is quite a good new live album from Neil Young. It's not with Crazy Horse. You can hear it's not with Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse make a song just sort of simmer for like 10 minutes. They're brilliant at that, and this band, The Promise the Real, I think is Willie Nelson's son's band. They have a lot of energy, so they make these songs sound a bit newer, but it's not Crazy Horse, but it's still pretty good. The pressing here, it's okay. It's better than Toast. I had 2 copies of Toast and they're both crap. Much better pressing is this one. I've spoken about this album before on this channel, so I'm not going to labour the point today. And I have to apologise here to Olaf because I haven't taken off the reflective cover, the polythene wrap. The Buddha of Suburbia by David Bowie. This is a great pressing, if you want to know that. It's a really, really great pressing. And yeah, a great album. What I like about this is that there are some fantastic sort of ambient tracks and jazzy tracks that really recall Bowie's work in the 70s. The next one is a CD. This is from Monolake called Polygon Cities. Monolake is Robert Henke, and maybe somebody else when this was made because I think he was a duo. Robert Henke is the guy that co-developed Ableton Live. He is a German. He lives in Berlin. Also German, and this is a great track actually, and I don't have the CD or the vinyl of this. This is by a band, or a guy, I think it's a guy, called Seriosmo. And the title of the song is Einmal in der Woche schreien, which means scream once a week. So basically I built a playlist with this song in it, and then I put the Bowie in, the Neil Young and the Monolake, and then also tested these speakers with streaming and also, yeah, obviously with vinyl and CDs. Regular viewers of this channel will know of my preference for more progressive industrial design when it comes to hi-fi hardware. Now you might think in that case that I would prefer the look of the KEF LS60 Wireless, but I don't. I actually prefer the more understated, traditional furniture vibe of the Focus 30. Moreover, the DYNAUDIO is physically lighter and it's smaller than the KEF. And it sounds it too. Not by much, but enough to remark upon. Now, even though the Focus 30 can go as low as the KEF, it just doesn't have the gut punch of the LS60. Not sure why that is, but that's just the way I hear it. Maybe it can't move as much air or isn't moving as much air. I never felt that I ever needed to add a subwoofer to the Focus 30 from DYNAUDIO, just as I didn't with the LS60 Wireless from KEF. I mean, you can, and they probably sound better. And yes, the Focus 30 in the app does have the option for a high pass filter. So that does help when integrating a sub to take some of the burden away from the mains loudspeakers. But yeah, I don't know, I just don't feel the need to add a sub to either of these loudspeakers. Besides, we're trying to isolate the performance of the loudspeakers, so adding a sub to the mix only confuses that picture, or muddles that picture, or muddies that picture. Now this is where things could get a little bit pretentious, because the DYNAUDIO turns its fleetness of foot relative to the KEF into a bit of an advantage. That means that the DYNAUDIO's communication of dynamic contrasts sounds a bit more nimble than the KEF. Think of it this way, right? Think of the DYNAUDIOs as a female ballet dancer and the KEFs as a male ballet dancer, right? So the KEFs have a more of sort of a masculine, bolder build, and the DYNAUDIOs, yeah, have more feminine qualities. So they really kind of emphasize things like elegance and flow. And relatively speaking, the Focus 30 also play up a recording's air and its sense of space. So they pay closer attention than the KEFs, not just to the instruments, but also the spaces between the instruments. And that means I hear the DYNAUDIO playing music as if the house lights on the band playing were turned up an extra couple of notches. And that better emphasizes music's micro dynamics, whereas I think the KEF are better at communicating macro dynamics, so the bigger shifts. So yeah, the KEF sound a little bit more physical than the DYNAUDIO do, and also they have a bit more headroom available in terms of SPL. So if you're a loud listener or you've got a large room, the KEF are the way to go here. So the way I hear it, especially with the Bowie and with the Seriosmo, is that the DYNAUDIO tease out, or better tease out, music's more cerebral qualities. So finesse, filigree, surface textures, subtleties, small specific sounds and details and quirks and things like that. But these are audible qualities that tend to cause us to lift our head when listening, which is why that feature I mentioned earlier, the sort of DSP correction for the speaker's treble response, so dark, neutral and bright, is so important, so you can dial those to your subjective preference or to the music that you're listening to. So with some of the Bowie stuff and some, well, not so much the Monolake actually, I kept that at neutral, but with some of the Bowie stuff, I took it back down to dark. With the Neil Young, if it was a Crazy Horse Neil Young album, I would definitely take it down to dark because they can be a bit bright with the cymbals that sort of shimmer up top. But this one with the Promise of the Real, no, that's neutral all the way for me. Now some of you at this point will be asking, well John, why didn't you get the Focus 50? Because it seemed to be the much better size match to the LS60 Wireless. The reason is simple, it's price. the Focus are about €1,000 or 900 euros more than the LS60 Wireless in store, whereas the Focus 50 from DYNAUDIO, their bigger floor standard in this series, 10 grand. That's 3.5 grand more than the KEF, so like 40% more. So that's why I didn't ask for the Focus 50. Now, I find it quite hard to separate these two speakers, so the KEF and the DYNAUDIO Focus 30, on sound quality alone, at least at this point in the game. But I guess if you were really pressurizing me to say, John, you can only choose to keep one forever, I would choose the DYNAUDIO. The reason why is mainly down to their physically smaller size and their aesthetics, but also because of what comes next. This is the first speaker, hi-fi speaker, that I know of that puts Dirac Live room correction, room compensation software inside the speaker. And to help me set that up, once again, I phoned up my friend Terry Ellis in London. Terry is a professional Dirac Live installer. Terry.
Thanks, John. My name is Terry Ellis and I'm a professional Dirac Live calibrator, which means audiophiles hire me to set up Dirac for them within their hi-fi and AV systems, and it's always fun to work with John. And we use Dirac to measure the Focus 30's in-room response, with the intention of using Dirac to undo any of the room's negative effects on the speaker's sound. But I was really pleased to see the baseline response from the Focus 30 was excellent, with only really the region below 40 Hz requiring any major correction. But Dirac offers us more than this, so I used or created several different sound profiles. One probably more to my taste with more low end and more low end punch, one probably more to John's taste with slightly less low end punch and low end outputs, and then one with slightly more exciting and raised treble. And obviously it's up to John which one he preferred and wants to listen to, and on that, back over to you, John.
Thank you, Terry. Now, we should be clear that Dirac does not alter the sort of fundamental characteristics of a loudspeaker, just as a tailor's work doesn't alter, say, the pocket count on a suit, or the collar width, or the thickness of the material used to cut that suit, or even the surface texture of that material. But what Dirac Live does allow us to do is to kind of add a little bit of extra give here and bring in another section here. So what I'm talking about here is maybe boosting a certain set of frequencies and then bringing down another set of frequencies. Because in a small room like this one, 6 meters by 5 meters, the mathematics dictates, so the dimensions of the room dictate that there are bass problems, unavoidable. So if we can use, or we can use Dirac Live to bring down, in my case, 35 Hertz. I've got to pull it down a bit, but I think there was a bit of a drop just after 35 Hertz, so we just lifted that a little bit, just to smooth out the bass response in the room. And as I said in my last video, it would take an enormous amount of bass traps to do that in this room using passive physical treatments. And I don't want that many bass traps in my room. No way. I mean, I've got all this stuff. It's kind of madness as it is. I don't want to have a wall of bass traps here and there. No. So I'm happy to use software. Software probably isn't quite as good, but it's good enough. And it makes a dramatic difference in most cases, to the performance or the sound of loudspeakers. I say in most cases because with these Focus 30 in this room, the difference between Dirac on and off wasn't or isn't as large as I've heard it in the past when we've applied it to passive loudspeakers. Now that might be because DYNAUDIO's software engineers have really maxed out the performance of these speakers and these drivers in this configuration in this box to give us a fantastic starting point. It might also be, and I suspect this is also true, that these speakers are a better acoustic fit from the outset for this room. I certainly did not complain about this with the KEF, but I did say that I suspected the KEF, not just physically, but in terms of the amount of sound they put out in the low end, was just a bit too much for this room. And I think the Focus 30 are more of a sort of like Goldilocks sort of sweet spot solution. But what I do get from having Dirac turned on with the Focus 30 is a marginally tighter low end. I get better, just slightly, mid-range clarity. And I get a slightly wider soundstage. So Dirac seems to just spread things out a little bit more. And I get a better image focus lock on that phantom center that sits between the loudspeakers. So Terry's job in this case, in applying Dirac Live to these loudspeakers, was more one of subtle tastemaker. So would Sir like a little bit more low end for when listening to streaming? Now I say this because my turntable has a good amount of low end punch, or rather it does with the phono stage that I use for MiFi. So I didn't want overcooked bass. So I got Terry to adjust the target curve for my vinyl playback, or rather create me a curve for my vinyl playback that had slightly less bass than I had for my streaming curve, which added a bit more bass, because Dirac's stock curve seems to want to always sort of take the bass away, take the fun away. And also Terry gave me a curve where perhaps would like a little bit more zing in the top end, because Dirac, once enabled, effectively kills the DSP correction that the speakers have in their sort of default non-Dirac operational mode. I'm talking about the treble, the neutral, the bright and the dark settings. We can't access those any longer, so we have to do that in Dirac. So I had a menu of about, I think 3 or 4, maybe 5 different correction curves that I could just punch in inside the app anytime I wanted. And that was great, because I could just do it according to physical playback medium or mood, or yeah, just the music I was listening to at any given time. I think what I'm saying is like Dirac gives us a lot of flexibility. And here's the other thing though, that it does seem to take away some of the validity of the comparison with the KEF, because clearly with Dirac enabled, the Focus 30 can have a multitude of different voices, of different sounds, of different personalities. However, I will say this, or I guess the question I get asked a lot is, well, John, can we DSP or EQ the Focus 30 to sound like the KEF? And the answer is a flat no. The sort of fundamental characteristics of each speaker still hold, but we can push each speaker with Dirac, if it's there, in various directions to better suit our room and our taste and our music and our hardware and all sorts of other sort of subjectively pleasing things. The downside of Dirac being inside the Focus 30 from DYNAUDIO is a small processing delay. Now for music, this is no biggie. Well, apart from when you drop the needle on a record, because you kind of drop the needle and then you hear the dunk. However, it's most egregious when you're trying to watch TV, because it knocks the lip sync out of whack. I'm talking here about using my Samsung frame connected to these speakers over Toslink. Now, one weird way that I did find around this issue, I don't know why this is the case, but if we have the Apple TV streamer, so this is only for Apple TV users, if you have that, send the audio portion of the video stream to the Focus 30 over AirPlay, so into the AirPlay 2 input, it seems to work okay with Dirac enabled. But if you turn Dirac off, then the lip sync is out of whack again. So I don't know why that is, not quite sure. And when streaming WISA, so HDMI out of the TV, into the plug-in hub and then WISA to the loudspeakers, there's no lip sync issue at all. But when I'm kind of punching through my different Dirac filters, or target curves, I can't hear a difference. So for some reason, I don't think Dirac is fully engaged when using the WISA input. So it's clear that DYNAUDIO still have some work to do to sort of iron out these wrinkles with the DSP or processing delay of Dirac, or the way it performs with different streaming inputs. But that's what this speaker's over-the-air firmware updates are for. So I think over time, these things will get ironed out. At least I hope they will. So this is a high-end audio system, a high-end hi-fi in a box. Well, actually it comes in 2 boxes. And I think it's utterly, utterly fantastic, especially because of the Dirac room correction software inside. But even when Dirac is turned off, even if you don't use it, I still think that the Focus 30 are a better fit, probably, for people with smaller rooms like me. I used to think this room was like the kind of lower end of medium, but my acoustics insider friend Jesko Lohan put me straight on that. He said, no, you've got a small room. So I tend to think that the DYNAUDIO are a better fit for smaller rooms like this than, say, the KEF or other much larger loudspeakers. But I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here, in that I don't think, and I think this is also true of KEF with the LS60 Wireless, but I don't think DYNAUDIO are aiming their Focus series squarely at audiophiles. I don't think so at all. I mean, yeah, they want the approval of audiophiles, but they don't really want, well, I don't think they really care if audiophiles buy them or not, because they're going after a much, the way I see it, larger market. And that is people who have grown up with Sonos, who are now maybe in their 30s, 40s and 50s, and want something better. They have more disposable income. They're looking for, like, what's better than a Sonos? They've got a few grand to spend, and they come across the Focus 30 from DYNAUDIO. And the reason this is so appealing to the Sonos generation is because it's just like a Sonos, as in it's a streaming active loudspeaker, as in everything is in the loudspeaker box. You just plug each loudspeaker into the mains, you use an app to configure them, and then you use your main sort of streaming apps to play music to them. And there's also room correction built in, because don't forget Sonos has TruePlay. Here we have Dirac Live, so we got that as well. So this for me is like a high-end, a super high-end Sonos system. And I know I said this about the SVS Prime Wireless Pro, and I called that like Super Sonos. So in mainlining that idea, then the DYNAUDIO Focus 30 for me are super duper Sonos. So yeah, if you're a dyed-in-the-wall audiophile, and I guess I am, then you have to understand that not everything that is expensive and hi-fi is necessarily all about you. I mean, I've said before on this channel that I'm into high-end passive loudspeaker systems made up of separate components, but I'm also really into things like this. I have this sort of dual personality with these things. So they do talk to me, but if you're a dyed-in-the-wall separates guy, this is not the speaker for you. Not at all. It's not aimed at you. If you don't like the idea of having all the electronics in the speaker, again, this speaker is not for you. It's for people who grow up with Sonos and sound systems like it, right? So if you can live with that, and you like this video, then please give us a like down below. If you like my attitude towards high-end audio, in that I like to think I'm pretty pragmatic about different kinds of solutions for different people, and that not everything is for everybody, right? So this thing is for those people, these things are for these people, and these things are for those people over there. If you like the fact that I can sort of think outside of myself, then please consider subscribing to this channel. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching. Hi, it's me again. If you're expecting outtakes here, no, not this week. I want to just remind you that every video that I make is time limited, and that means it is also scope limited. So everything that I could possibly think of and experimented with these loudspeakers and compared to the KEF, I put into this video. I didn't do anything and then think, no, I'm not going to talk about that in the video. No, it went in the video. And that also means that basically if it's not in the video, then I didn't do it, right? Because everything that I did do, I put into the video. So if you want to know more about a certain feature, I'm sorry, I just can't help you because I put everything that I could think of and knew about and understood or discovered into this video. Similarly, with the comparison, I compared it to the KEF LS60 Wireless 2. That LS60 Wireless 2, LS60 Wireless, excuse me. And that comparison took me over a week to conduct. So if you're about to ask, okay, John, well, how does the Focus 30 compare to a pair of stand mounts and a subwoofer? The answer is, I'm really sorry, but I've got no idea because I didn't do that comparison. Because again, if I'd done it, I would have put it in the video, right? Simple. I think it's kind of simple. So I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy here. I'm just trying to help you guys understand that every video I make can only contain so much information because there is only so much time available in the week, and I'm working 60 hours a week to make these videos. There's only so much time available to put these videos together. So they're going to be limited, and they are going to leave some people a little bit disappointed with the content, thinking, you know, I wish John had spoken more about this, or I wish he'd done that. Yeah, I wish I'd spoken more about this and done more of that, but I can't because of time limitations. So yeah, please understand that. However, I will be doing a comments Dear John follow-up video to this one. So I will be picking out the best comments and questions from the comment section below if you want to leave one. Once again, a reminder, please be polite. It is not hard, I don't think, unless you're a teenager, to disagree and be polite, right? It's just, I don't understand how we've arrived at a time where people just seem to behave like teenagers on the internet. So please don't bring that attitude to my yard. So yeah, polite comments are most welcome, and I'll pick some of the best ones and I'll do a follow-up video in a week or so. Oh, and I almost forgot, and I don't even know how I could forget this. I should say that the remote control here is more substantial feeling than the KEF's remote control. I think it's better spec'd, including, you know what's coming here, right? Red Hot Chili Peppers button.